We passed, and Governor Scott signed into law, the most comprehensive overhaul of Medicaid in Florida's history. We decided that to help our economy get going again, we had to change the way that government does business with business. We passed a remarkably aggressive, game-changing growth management reform. We also completely reorganized the state's economic development entities. And thirdly, we eliminated the corporate income taxes for over half of the Florida businesses that paid them. We curbed what could have been a damaging increase in unemployment taxes. We created a merit pay system for Florida's teachers, and we passed the strongest set of pro-life initiatives in many, many years. And in short, I think we had an extraordinary session. And so the inevitable question, and the reason that I'm sure many of you have made the trip here today, is to ponder what's next. And that is something that I have asked myself numerous times and spent many, many hours contemplating. And to be frank, over the past session, we succeeded in accomplishing nearly all of the goals that I set for myself and for the institution of the House. But there are others, and there are some, where we made substantial progress, but we still have more work to do. This session, we're going to face the challenging and increasingly complicated process of drawing new legislative and congressional districts. We're also going to face another daunting budget deficit. We will again be faced with hard choices, and good and worthwhile programs will have to absorb cuts. Last year, for the first time in the history of the Republican majority, the House passed legislation to actually eliminate certain regulations of various professions. Unfortunately, that bill did not make it on the last day of session, and I'm hopeful that we will see it revisited again this year. And additionally, while I do not anticipate having as aggressive an agenda this year on policy items, I hope that we can start the beginning of a serious conversation on higher education reform that can be acted on in coming years and carried on with incoming Speaker Weatherford and incoming President Gates in the Senate. Finally, I hope to make more progress towards what has been a personal goal of mine, which is to leave the Florida House of Representatives better and stronger than when I found it, and to ensure the continued success of this institution that I love, despite the challenges created by term limits. One way I've tried to do that is improve the quality and accessibility of information for members of the House, members of the media, and our constituents. And I understand that, I'm a journalism undergrad. I understand that for members in the media, your work is time constrained, you have limited and diminishing or shrinking resources, and the value of your industry and your work is often underappreciated. But that does not justify fact errors or failing to seek out and report both sides of an issue or giving less than a full picture of an issue. I could legitimately make the same claims regarding time constraints and limited resources available to the legislature or to state government to justify decisions we make in Tallahassee, but you wouldn't buy it, and I wouldn't ask you to. And that's because at the end of the day, we both have a responsibility to do our jobs, and our actions, our choices, and our words have consequences. Your responsibility to the people of Florida is no less important, and your written words have as many consequences as my spoken words or my votes on the floor. Your stories travel quickly. Thanks to the internet, they last forever. Fact errors, however inadvertent or unintentional, can easily cause great damage to people and issues, and they quickly spread beyond the reach of updates you may be able to provide or corrections that you may have the ability or the willingness to issue. And perhaps more hazardous than a fact issue is an incomplete story or a story that doesn't give the full picture to your readers and our constituents. I love words. Words matter. And I know that accuracy is important to you, and I know it's important to our members, and most importantly to the citizens of Florida who read your stories and trust your outlets to provide the right information about what we are doing or endeavoring to do, rightly or wrongly. And your job, of course, is to cover both. The common thread between us and you is that need for information, and for good information and timely information. We need information for members to make decisions in committee and on the floor. We need information for staff members to address constituents' concerns, and we need to get that information to you timely and accurately so you can tell Florida's story. The House has worked hard and made, I think, great strides in achieving an unprecedented level of accurate, concise, and timely substantive information through the House Office of Public Information. We've created a series of nonpartisan plain language documents that many of you individually have commented to me have been very helpful to explain or help at least set a backdrop for a complex policy conversation. We've incorporated the use of video in order to try and reach a broader constituency, as many of you are doing as well. And we've upgraded our software to allow for more efficient and electronic processing of both information in both directions, public records requests, and the like. Last session, for the first time in, I believe, and y'all who've been around longer than I have can check me on this, for the first time in the history of the House, our Rules Committee produced and publicized a daily order of business that communicated everything from the bills up for consideration to the debate times agreed upon by the majority and minority parties, to a clear indication of procedural motions necessary to ensure the proper flow of business. And we did not introduce a single late filed amendment, and we made descriptions of amendments prepared by the substantive staff available to members, the press, and the public. And message lists, which over time have been one of the more opaque parts of the process, were electronically formatted and distributed the minute they became available. Ultimately, the members of the House and members of the media have had the greatest possible opportunity to understand what we were voting on and when we were voting on it. I encourage you to take advantage of these resources, and if there's a way that we can do any of them better, we are open to that input. Tomorrow, as you'll know, we'll have our third annual pre-session press information session, something started by Speaker Creedle, which I am so glad we've continued, and I hope you will please accept my invitation to attend. And finally, I'd like to mention an issue that I found somewhat frustrating over the last year. I know that for many, the presiding officers of the House and Senate are viewed as autocratic authorities of the legislative branch. And you know that I firmly believe in the separation of powers. The legislative and the executive branches are different for a reason. I'm the Speaker, I'm not the Governor. I've looked on with disappointment sometimes as many reporters seem set to focus their narratives or their stories on me and my opinion, while ignoring perhaps my leadership team, the substantive committee chairs, and even often the member who's actually carrying a particular bill. And I don't and I won't weigh in on every issue. There are 120 members of the House, and in many cases I'm not the best member to offer a comment on a particular issue or piece of legislation. It is my job as Speaker to manage the process and not to single-handedly pick winners and losers. Now, as those of you who've been around the process know, I am not saying that I don't have influence, and I'm not saying that I don't weigh in on some issues, and on some issues weigh in very heavily, but I don't do it to the extent or perhaps to the ways that I think it's tempting for many of you who have a tight deadline to meet to expect. And I encourage you that I've worked hard to create a fair process that allow members to succeed or fail within a defined set of rules and expectations that are clear from the onset, and I want you to seek them out as well. I understand the power that's inherent in the role of Speaker, but I also know that leaders are often and appropriately judged for their restraint in not always weighing in and in not always trying to micromanage things. That's part of who I am as a conservative and who I am, I believe, as a Speaker. It's easy to call and ask, what does the Speaker think about this or that issue? It is difficult in a term-limited environment to get to know the other members, to get to know their backgrounds and their goals and their aspirations for a particular policy issue. I'm happy to answer your questions and provide my opinion when it is appropriate or when I think it fits that broad structure, but I encourage you to get to know the other members, because there's some great men and women who work extraordinarily hard up here to serve in the House and in the Senate. This has been a great job. The opportunity to serve as Speaker is a rare privilege, and it's one that I am extraordinarily grateful to have, and I want to treat through this coming session with a mixture, hopefully, of determination and humility and gratitude for the privilege to serve in it. I hope that you will understand and respect my approach to that position, and I sometimes restrain my comments and limit those commitments, not because I don't have opinions, but because I have a greater respect for our members and for the institution, and I'm trying to inculcate that into the institution in my last session. Thank you again so much for what you do. I get and understand how challenging your profession is, and I'll open up and use the remainder of my time to answer any questions y'all may have.